Hello there, Commonwealth from here. Zelda and new Nintendo hardware since 2015. Name me a more iconic duo. Now I will admit, the OLED launched with Metroid Red, and yes, we're giving away one of them with a game at 300,000 subscribers. Less than 3,000 left to go, so sub and leave a like. But if there's something that Nintendo has learned from experience, then it is the following. New hardware and new Zelda games equals unimaginable success, as it has happened twice with the two most successful home consoles of all time, the Wii and the Nintendo Switch. The only problem is that the development of new 3D Zelda games has become a 6-year process at this point, so nearly if not an entire console generation. Which brings us to the point of the video, namely that Digital Foundry claims that these 7 seconds of footage are too good to run on the Switch, even the OLED model, and that this clip of a cutscene has to be an indication of new hardware, or at the very least a new top model Switch. Indirectly suggesting that Breath of the Wild 2's delay from 2022 to spring 2023, much like the original's final delay from 2016 to March 3rd, 2017, might be related to turning the game from the big Switch holiday game of 2022 to a dual launch title among the Nintendo Switch, Lite, OLED, with something else. But what? A Switch Pro, a Switch successor as we pointed out in detail in this video a few weeks back? No matter which of the two, if Digital Foundry's theory, because that is what I call it, is correct, then it means that the game will not look like this on the Switch we currently own, but on a model that we will have to pay hundreds upon hundreds of dollars in order to upgrade to a new model or even a successor system to achieve, which would stink on so many levels, mainly due to the cost of playing Breath of the Wild 2 with the visuals and performance it was meant to be played with. Nevertheless, before we deliver our conclusions, let's go over the footage and look at what is different in terms of graphics and effects. A quite fitting exercise since the footage looks visibly better than the recap footage from the E3 2021 teaser, which followed before the 7 seconds of glory. But how? Most visibly, the color balance and vibrancy, which is much closer to Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, a game which cutscenes I don't have to color correct at all when editing, than to Breath of the Wild, which I have to constantly color correct. So what do I mean by color correction? Well, that the colors are stronger, much like you experience on the handheld OLED compared to the regular Switch. They feel more vibrant, striking, and far more eye-catching than the washed-out Breath of the Wild. But I disagree that this alone is the reason for this being considered next-gen hardware footage by Digital Foundry, since color balancing is a choice, not something that depends on the hardware. If that would be the case, then why have most past Zelda titles not had this issue, as I never have to color balance footage from the Wind Waker or even Ocarina of Time. It is an artistic choice, and it is clear that the Zelda team is looking at ways to make the sequel stand out from Breath of the Wild. First it was the combinations, then the introduction of 2 new layers both under and on top of the open world map, and the third thing is this. A game which visuals are more striking, and thus it wouldn't surprise me if exactly the feedback and experience from Age of Calamity was what made the Zelda team tweak the color settings into that direction. But what about the effects surrounding Link, like the volumetric clouds that Digital Foundry referenced to? Well, the hair seems to be moving similarly, but the difference is in the particles, and more specifically, as pointed out, the volumetric clouds and perfect anti-aliasing between cuts. And by the latter, we mean the light effects in front of Link and the glowing symbol on his hand. The way the light glows and bends, and it being gold makes it even more clear that there are some visual upgrades added to this sequel. Though that has been a well-known fact since the first look trailer in 2019, as several videos back then pointed out. Though this time there appears to be more to the puzzle, namely the textures of the new tunic, which's ancient origins we detailed in our previous video, and the shield on Link's back. But the main culprit is the glow effects, and specifically from his hand it radiates around the hilt of the Master Sword on top of the Blade of Evil's Bane's own outer glow. So what can our conclusions be from this festival of glow? The fact that the Zelda team wanted to highlight an advanced cutscene filled with multiple different lighting effects, all present within a single frame of carefully selected footage, which brings key new story details to the tape. A story, gameplay, and graphical update all in one. But can the regular Switch run it? Well, it depends on a few factors. And the most key ones of these is that we cannot forget that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was for years developed for the Wii U, to the point that it had in its first gameplay demo at the Game Awards 2014 integrated gamepad support for its map, which was clearly inspired from the way you use the map in 2013's The Wind Waker HD. This feature was cut out by the time the game got its first and second delay and was nowhere to be seen in the first public demo at E3 2016. Still, despite the massive gap in sold copies, the fact remains that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a Wii U game which, due to its level of development and its focus on being a dual release title on both the Wii U and Nintendo Switch, couldn't favor one over the other too much. Naturally, compromises were made, and the greatest hardware benefit for the Switch was those slightly higher resolutions, 900p over 720p, and at times better frame rate. Two different system architectures that presumably the Zelda team don't have to deal with when developing the follow-up to the open world masterpiece. As yes, Breath of the Wild sequel is not coming to the Wii U, but the Nintendo Switch in spring 2023. At the same time, Nintendo has made it clear that the Nintendo Switch is halfway in its life cycle, something they said for the first time in January 2021, so nearly 4 years after the launch of the initial Switch. Which brings us to the key matter of cross-gen, a strategy to add more power for a new model before the next generation arrives. A tactic which became a reality for TV consoles in the previous generation. That is, the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X. Hardware that allow for upscaling up to 4K, better draw distance, more seamless anti-aliasing, and so on. They also ran on the same disc, so naturally Nintendo would not lie about a halfway claim in front of investors. If you just throw in a more powerful model which runs on the same cartridges as the Switch. That is cross-gen in a nutshell, a significantly more powerful model which still uses the same disc as the base model without a dedicated disc platform. But what is key with such a top model is that you release it before some key games, and that is exactly what PlayStation did with their most ambitious game releases. Horizon in 2017, followed by God of War and the open world Spider-Man by the end of 2018. It was a big success for Sony, and Nintendo might see this strategy, which they already did on the handhelds in the past, as a golden opportunity, one that allows them to extend their greatest success story for TV-made games, while also giving Breath of the Wild sequel on the most powerful model the visuals they want to provide. In other words, there are most likely no marketing lies here with this footage, since technically a Switch Pro or Super Switch is still a Nintendo Switch, and a part of the family, only with more powerful specs inside. The problem with it though is for all of us who already own a Switch across the 100+ million systems, since they might not get to play Breath of the Wild 2 with these visuals and have to fork out probably $400 in order to play the best version of the game. Unless we are witness to a technical miracle within these 7 seconds, and thanks to AMD's FSR upscaling technology we have all of these upgrades. We know that Nintendo Switch Sport is already taking advantage of this technology, but Breath of the Wild 2, a game with an open world plus underground sections and an entire new sky, is a completely different matter. A true test of the capabilities of the hardware, and certainly some minor edges could be improved with the use of this upscaling cheat code, without the need for more powerful processing, which for instance Nvidia's DLSS upscaling technology requires, at least when it comes to Nintendo Switch Tegra X1 chip. And this is the thing. As of 2022, and definitely spring 2023, the Switch hardware for new open world titles is outdated. This system was only slightly more powerful than the Wii U when it launched, and it shows. And in order to deliver better visuals for Breath of the Wild 2, you might need something more. Though keep in mind that I'm saying might, since which other gigantic upcoming game might take advantage of a more powerful model? Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is launching in September, most likely before said hardware was to launch with Breath of the Wild sequel. The same goes for Pokemon Gen 9 Scarlet and Violet, the first open world Pokemon title ever. All big map titles that will face the same issues as Breath of the Wild 2 on the regular Switch. Resolutions, draw distance, pop-in, frame rate, anti-aliasing, foliage, you name it. Does it come surprising that these games are coming out before the hardware that could make them look and run better at launch? And these are questions that should be asked. But then again, Zelda, and more so Breath of the Wild, has that system selling power across nearly all age groups and gamers in general, which makes some hardware upgrade in spring 2023 likely, and a new generation system a possibility. As open world seems to become the norm for more and more franchises, and with it more powerful hardware is required, so it will be extremely exciting to see where we are by the launch of Breath of the Wild sequel. From a succession perspective, it makes sense to not wait, since it will be another 6 years most likely before the next open world Zelda game after Breath of the Wild sequel is out. Plus open world titles are just so demanding, and the basic Switch is clearly struggling to provide the same technical deliverance compared to the gameplay developed by the Kyoto Zelda team, since let's be honest, the 2017 art style remains the same in spring 2023. What can look better is its graphical fidelity and effects, just like we have seen in that 7 seconds of footage. What do you think of this footage looking better than everything we have seen so far? And is Digital Foundry right that Nintendo will continue the 2-year hardware pattern with yet another family member or even successor in 2023? Sound off in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell, as we are less than 3,000 subscribers away from 300,000, and with it our big Switch OLED plus game giveaway. So let's do it before my 30th birthday on June 13th. Last but definitely not least, a big thanks to you for watching, and all patreon.com/CommonRealm patrons, and in particular royal producer Charles Shash. You rock, and please enjoy one or both of these 2 awesome videos.